Hello. How are you all doing?
Good.
Okay, that's good. I guess it's hard to give individual answers like that, huh? But so sometimes I have a little presentation that I do, but it doesn't let me really talk to people then, and I don't get to hear what you're thinking about and what you want to talk about, and that's what I'm most interested in. So I guess I can say a couple of words, but I feel like I get the sense with all this girl power in the room, we're going to get really good questions, and most of what I would just stand here and tell you will come up in me answering your questions. So I want to do a dialogue and a conversation with you rather than a monologue. How does that sound to you?
Good.
Okay, good. Let's do that. So some arts, like movies, they're really collaborative, right? Can anyone here tell me what collaboration means? You can collaborate among yourselves and then tell me what you think, what collaboration means? Yes.
You could talk or like discuss.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Tell ideas.
Great.
When.
Okay, fabulous. So it's all of those things, but done with 2 or more people. So a collaboration is even if you're helping your family members cook and you're all working on one meal, you're collaborating together to make that meal. So you're all working together. You know what I mean? Okay, so this book is a collaboration. And usually in fiction, with novel writing, just one person writes a book. But Silas and I, my co-author, we decided to collaborate. So we decided to jointly write the book, to write it together. So I wrote the character Mina, and thank you. I only wrote Mina, and Silas only wrote River. And we had a pretty strange process in writing it in the sense that we wanted it to be really real. So I had the idea for writing this book, and actually, I had the idea for writing an epistolary novel. It's another big word. Anybody know what epistolary means? I didn't know until I was like 25. Yeah. Okay.
It's kind of like a novel. I think I know it. It's like a novel with 2 parts in it.
Okay. Very close. Fantastic. Anyone else want to try and help? We'll collaborate on our definition. Epistolary. Ooh, yeah, we're coming in on that definition now. We're honing in on it. Okay, great. You had your hand raised. Yeah.
Is it a book written with letters?
Yeah, exactly. So this is, it's a novel in letters, and it's just a big fancy word that just means in letters. So you can also have an epistolary biography, so somebody's biography that's just compiled of letters, but so in letters. So how far into the book are you guys? You're finished. Wow, that's impressive. Okay. So you know that the whole book is in letters. It's just composed of these 2 kids writing letters to each other. So what Silas and I did in the process of writing the book is that we made a pact at the very beginning that we were never going to discuss the plot or the characters or what was going to happen. We were just going to write to each other in real time. So Silas said, okay, you had the idea for the book. You write the first letter in character as Mina. Go to the post office, get a stamp, get an envelope, mail it to me. I will read it and I will write back to you in character as River. So we sometimes would email each other and say, you haven't written back in a while, did you get my last letter? And he'll say yes. He'd say, yes, I loved it. River will write to you soon, and that's it. So we were really strict with each other about that because we wanted the story to unfold more organically, as if it were 2 real characters talking to each other. So that was a big risk. It was tricky. It could have failed miserably, but we got lucky and it worked. And I think also it's really important in collaboration to work with someone, not just somebody who you respect, but also somebody that you trust. Like in school, it's sometimes easier to work with some people rather than others, right? People just have certain chemistries and personalities. So we were lucky in choosing to collaborate with each other, actually mainly because we could argue with each other well. So we could disagree on something, And it was okay, we didn't fall to pieces, we respected each other enough that we could disagree and then come to a place where we had agreement and move forward. So, okay, I'm done talking at you. I wanted to give you a little basis, but let's see what you want to talk about. Yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
Did anyone disagree with you on writing a book because you were a girl?
I'm sorry, say one more time?
Did anyone disagree with you on writing a book because you were a girl?
That's a great question. No, nobody disagreed with me on writing the book, but I think it's always still, unfortunately, a little bit more difficult for women in the publishing industry. And it's weird because there are technically more women and girl readers than there are men. If you look at the statistics, whoever it is who compiles those statistics, there's the vast majority of readers are women. There are less male readers in the world. So it doesn't really make sense that it's a little bit more difficult for women to get published, but really what it is it's more difficult for women to get reviewed. You know how in newspapers and online there are book reviews? That helps with marketing and getting people interested the same way it works for music and an album. So it's harder for women to get reviewed for some strange reason still, and women get less money in publishing in general. So there are still inequalities in terms of gender in this day and age in all walks of life, and that includes publishing. So, great question, and when y'all are old enough and you're out in the world, that's something else you can change. Yes?
After the book, who would you most like to meet? Is that Daddy?
Yeah.
Who would you most like to meet is like that?
Who's more like Dadi in the book? You mean in terms of me or my co-author? Yeah, I think I'm probably, so Silas only wrote River and Mama. So he's that, all of those characters Silas wrote, and so I wrote Dadi and Mina and Kiku and Mom and Dad. So Dadi is a lot like my grandmother. I have some similarities to Mina in that I was born and raised in the States, but I did go to school in India and live with my grandmother when I was 6. And then again, I went when I was 19. But my grandmother's from the Northwest Mountains of India, and she's a lot like my grandmother in real life. Yes. Yes.
The events that happen in Nina's life, can you relate to anything like that?
Absolutely, I can relate to a lot of them. So I think when you're a writer, especially of fiction, which is supposedly not real, right? Even though it's not real and fiction is made up as opposed to nonfiction, you know, you guys have read some nonfiction like biographies, so fiction is more made up. But you still have to have these elements of truth to them, and I think of them as emotional truths. So sometimes my characters go through things that I've never experienced physically, like, let's see. So I wasn't born and raised in India. I don't know what it's like to be fully born and raised in India. But having gone from America to India, I know what it's like to be on that long plane ride. I know what it's like to miss family on one side of the ocean or the other. I know what it's like to negotiate and move between two worlds and two cultures at the same time. So I took those experiences that I know and I gave them to my character, Mina. Also, I was in the school play in 7th and 8th and 9th grade, and I was too shy to be on stage, so I always did lights and sound. I can't draw at all, so that's an element of pure fiction, and I had another collaborator in the book who was an artist, and she did the drawings. So some things are true and I can relate to specifically, and some things are imagined, but the emotional truth, the emotional core, like her actual feelings and experiences, those I feel connected to and I can relate to. I think the main job of a writer is to be human. So you have to be really in touch with your own humanity so that you can reach readers' humanity. Because we can all relate to each other. It's just a question of setting up things as a writer. Let me go in the back. Yes, yes.
So I was going to ask you, the reason that book saying that year, was it because since you said that you guys were actually sending letters to each other, did you guys have similarities like in writing back and forth to each other?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when you collaborate, like I was saying, sometimes there are difficulties you have to agree, and a title, there's just one title. We don't have two titles, right? So we had to agree on one title, and that was something we argued about back and forth a little bit in a very respectful, fun, loving way because we're friends. But we didn't get the title until the very end of the book. Sometimes people think titles come first, but often titles come last because a title has to sum up what a book is all about, and you don't always know what a book is all about until you finish writing it. So I think Silas had one that was Our Own True Selves, which was something from the book. And I don't know, it felt a little bit self-helpy to me. And so I was like, I don't know, I don't love it. And then we had True Colors for a little while, but then we both didn't love it. And then we just started looking through the book and looking for phrases that seemed indicative of the book as a whole, that seemed to sum up the book as a whole, the theme of it. And I think at one point, you guys read it more recently than I did, so you might remember better than I do, but Mina is writing him a letter and she says something like she's walking to school and missing him or something, and she realized it's the same sun that's over both of us, same sun here as it is there. And so that was the feeling of the two of them being together under the sun. So that's where we got the title, because we thought that was speaking to the spirit of the book. Yes, hon? I'm going to this side next, I promise.
What made you want to write the book between letters and why?
That's a good question, and a hard one. Well, I had read a number of books that were written that way, and I found them really fascinating and beautiful because there's no point of view. I don't know if you guys have spoken about point of view, but you know how when you read a novel or a short story, it's either the character saying, I did this, I did that, so that's first person point of view, but sometimes it's third person, so she did this, she did that. So I liked in letters that it's first person, each person has to speak in the I, because they're the one writing the letter, but it's overheard. I was interested in the structure and the way you can play with point of view that way. So that was one thing, but what happened is I knew my character really well when I first had the idea for writing an epistolary novel, but I didn't know who my character was writing to, and then I suddenly thought, wait a minute, why don't I see if another writer I know is interested in being the other character? That could be really interesting. And so I asked my friend Silas, because we collaborated on other things academically, lectures and stuff, and he said, well, actually I'm about to start writing a children's book about this little boy named River who's dealing with mountaintop removal mining, and he said, that'll be who she writes to, let's go, send me the first letter. So that's how it happened, but I think mainly I really liked the structure of it, the idea of it, the form of it, and that there's something really interesting about eavesdropping to me. Maybe it's because I'm a writer, but I think all New Yorkers kind of like to eavesdrop. You're sitting on the subway and you hear an interesting conversation, everybody kind of leans in and listens in. So with letters, you're almost eavesdropping on this relationship unfolding, and I thought that was interesting artistically and just in terms of being a human. Okay, this side, yes. Yes.
Did you have a pen pal when you were younger?
I did. Her name is Helen, and she lived in Wales. She lived a very rural life in the country. She lived on a farm, and we learned so much from each other because we were so different. And I think that definitely influenced me. And she had a turtle named Flash. For some reason, I haven't read her letters in a long time, but I'll never forget the way she wrote about her turtle. And I think that really loving, gentle spirit that she had towards her turtle, I think I've got infused in Mina, the character Mina. Do you have a pen pal? I know you guys are trying to work with a school in the Midwest. Did it start up yet?
Not yet. Very
Not
soon.
yet? Okay, cool. But do you have a pen pal, or have you had a pen pal? Okay.
Was being an author a dream of yours?
You know, it was, and I always wanted to be a writer. I just didn't really quite know how. And I think every writer starts out being a writer by being a reader first. So I loved books. I was one of those kids who was just always reading, and I'd be told to go to bed, and I'd take out my flashlight and keep reading. I'd get in trouble at the dinner table because I was reading. So I think every writer is a reader first, and I started that way. But writing is a little tricky. My parents didn't want me to be a writer because they were worried about things like health insurance and a pension and money and security. But I didn't listen. And I did listen, though, in a way, because I only know very few writers in this world, and a few of my writer friends who can actually make a living as just a writer. It's rare. So most writers have more than one job. And I'm also a teacher. That's my other job, and I absolutely love it. But in America, in this day and age, it's sensible, if you want to be a writer, to also have other skills so that you can pay the bills. And you have to manage your time differently, so that you have this other job and you work, and you pay the bills, but then you have to prioritize you can't watch as much Hulu as you want to, because it has to be your time to write. So I always had that dream, and I chased it, but it's not an easy dream to follow. I don't think being an artist is ever easy, because you have to learn to juggle and manage real life with being devoted and passionate about your craft. But I do think it's important to follow your passions and make it work for yourself, while also keeping yourself fed and your family safe and stable. So it's a balancing act, like most things. Yes?
May I ask you, Julie?
Sure.
Out of all the jobs that you had before when you were younger, which was your favorite and why?
Ooh, you guys are good. You could be journalists, all of you. Okay, let's see. So I had a lot of weird jobs when I was younger, specifically because of what I was just saying, because I didn't want to get a 9-to-5 job in an office because I knew I wouldn't have as much time to write. So I took weird jobs, and meaning not necessarily things I was educated for or trained for, but things that would give me more time. But I learned so much from every single one of them. So I was a waitress for a very long time, and in fact I paid off all of my PhD loans, cocktail waitressing. And so I taught during the day and I waitress at night. And so I was a waitress, I mucked out horse stalls, I did barbed wire fencing, I delivered telephone books. That was a very weird job. I drove an ice cream truck, and I've been a maid in 2 different hotels. So that's the kind of stuff I did before I became a professor. But throughout it all, I was a writer. So that's what I mean about the balancing and the juggling. So let's see, my favorite job out of all those, I think being a waitress. I really love being a waitress, and I'm good at it. I can balance a lot of stuff. I keep talking about balancing and juggling today. I can balance a lot of food and drinks in my hands. And I really like, with waitressing, you sweep up to a table, you have to assess the people instantly and kind of figure out, okay, who are they? Do they want me to talk? Do they want me to make a joke? Or do they want to be left alone? Do they want to know the specials? Do they not care about the specials? Because you're trying to get a good tip. But there's something about learning how to observe human beings and learning how to figure out what to do in a situation that's great about waitressing, and it's also great about being a writer. You have to be really observant to be a writer. I think all writers are witnesses. So waitressing was, I don't know, it's a good fit. The other thing that's good about waitressing is that even if you get a table of very rude people, they're only there for the length of the meal. So soon they will go away and a new table of people will come. So that's also something I liked about waitressing.
And the second
Yes.
question is, if you would give a shout out or a special thanks to someone, who would it be?
There's so many people. My husband, my parents, my friends, my family members, even my family members who have passed away, who are dead, friends who are dead, I would shout out to them too. I think that nobody does anything alone, really. We're all kind of standing on the shoulders of the people who came before us and the people who helped feed and clothe us and educate us, our teachers. I'd have so many shout outs to my teachers, actually. I should have said that. So I definitely believe nobody does anything alone. It's really important to express your gratitude to the people in your lives. Yes?
Why did you decide to write a book?
Why did I decide to write a book? Let's see. It's a strange thing, writing. I don't know that I decided ever to be a writer or to write. I just felt compelled to. Something in me needed to express myself. I think as a kid, in my family, in my culture, I didn't feel as free to express myself as I wanted to be. My parents were kind of strict and absolutely wonderful people and wonderful parents, but I had a lot of feelings and thoughts in my head that if I said them or showed them, it was like, no, don't do that, or I don't know, they were busy. So I felt like I was full of ideas and feelings that I didn't have anywhere to put them, and I was always sort of clamping down on them. And there's something about the arts. For me, it's writing. For you, it might be dance or painting or sculpting or singing, whatever it is, being in a play. It just lets you put all of that stuff someplace, and it contains it, and you get to work on craft and making it more beautiful and interesting. So I think sometimes writing chooses you, you don't choose it. And everybody finds sometimes it's cooking, sometimes it's sewing. You find something, an outlet to sort of put these extra feelings and thoughts that you have. You find a place to put them. And for me, it's writing. For you guys, for every single one of you, it'll be something different. It might be writing, but it might be something else. And part of growing up, I think for me, was about figuring out what it is that I connect with.
And how did you and your partner write?
How did what?
How did you and your partner write the book?
Oh, okay, so I was telling you guys earlier that we made that pact and we just actually mailed everything back and forth together. But something I didn't say is we did that for the first draft of the book. So in writing, as in life, revision is very important. And I know in school I hated revision. I hated having to rewrite things. I hated seeing all the red pen on my paper that I'd made mistakes and I had to do better. But as I have grown older, revision is my friend. And there's actually a kind of freedom in revision, because in life, sometimes you make mistakes and they stick to you. It's harder to fix them. But on the page, you can make mistakes and it's really easy to just start all over and fix them on the page. Nobody gets hurt, you don't get hurt, you can just fix them. So we did that process I was telling you about when writing the book, but in terms of revision, we had to work really closely together. We couldn't not talk to each other. So we read the whole book out loud to each other in each other's voices. I read Nina's letters, he read River's letters, and then we sat down and we started saying, okay, where does it feel flat? Where does the plot need some punch? This doesn't seem very believable, let's change this. And then we only attended to our own revisions, but we discussed with each other first how we were going to revise. Yes, all the way in the back.
Why didn't you write what happened when they met up?
Great question. So we didn't write what happened when they met up because we had one ending that was sort of like that, where they went home and then they wrote another set of letters to each other, and it just didn't work because there was something awkward about them being like, remember when we met here? Because all of the other letters have been in real time, and then all of a sudden it was like they were looking back and recapping what happened to each other, but they'd never talked to each other that way in a letter before. So that was one reason, because we actually tried it and it didn't feel good artistically. And the other reason is I think I like as a writer to leave a lot of space for every reader's imagination, because I bet if I gave everybody in here a piece of paper and I said, draw me what Nina looks like, she would look completely different to every single one of you. Even though you all read the same description, you bring your imagination to your reading and you see what you want to see, you see what you see. So we wanted to kind of leave them meeting up to every single reader's imagination. And there's one really cool writing exercise that I sometimes do with classes when we have a little bit more time, which is you write the ending. What do you think happened? So everybody just takes, you write like one page worth or a couple of paragraphs and just describe what you think happened when they met. Let me go over here now. Yes.
Are you ever going to write a second book?
You mean like a sequel to this one? We've thought about it and we're not sure yet, and if we do write a sequel, you tell me what you think of this. We wanted to jump ahead in time, so they're basically 13 when this book ends, and we wanted, if we started, we want to make it a young adult novel and start up with them at 16. And then, so see how they are when they're older, and their lives have changed, and how their relationship has changed and stuff. So we're still talking about it, but what do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, I'll tell Silas. Who did I didn't speak to you yet.
How long did it take you
To write the book? So it took us a year, and we wrote it during President Obama's inaugural election year. So we wrote it in the real time that the dates are on here. We had to change the dates in revision just to make things work, but we wrote to each other once a month for a year, and at the end of that time, we had a first draft of the book. It was messy, it wasn't perfect, but we had a first draft. So then the revision, here's the kicker, the revision probably took another 8 months, I'd say. So we had something completed and pretty good, okay, had a lot of potential, but to make it what you see here now, we had to work, and then with publishing, at that point, the writer's job is kind of finished, and it's in the hands of the publisher. So then, actually, we had to attend to the publisher's editorial notes too, so I'd say 3 years after we started writing the book came out. So it was kind of a 3-year process. But as writers, we were really only writing it for a year and 8 months, and the rest of that time is what happens when a book goes to the publisher and they figure out what does the cover look like, who's going to review it, which libraries and schools are going to read it, things like that. The business, there is unfortunately a business side to writing, and that usually takes about another year to 2 years. We spoke, didn't we? Yes. Did we speak? No. Okay.
Nina, I think Nina, like, in the story, I read that, her father, that, she barely gets to see him because he works, and he has to go, he works at New Jersey, in, a restaurant.
Yep.
And it takes 2 hours to get there, and I feel like that's kind of like my father, because I always see him, like, a few times, and he stays home only for the weekends, kind of like tomorrow on Friday. He works day and night, and he's back to something. And also, I feel like she's like me because even though I wasn't born in another place, I was born here, but almost my entire family is good. And she said that she doesn't get any cooking very well. And a little bit allergies.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was really brave and beautiful. And that's why I write. Because I know when I was a kid, I would read books, I'd open them up, and I didn't see myself in the pages of books. You want to see yourself in a book. And when I was growing up, it was 1970s, 1980s, a really long time ago. And first, there weren't as many girls in books back then, and most of the girls were white. And hardly any of the girls were immigrant. Came from another country or were new Americans. So reading, bless you, was kind of lonely for me back then. And part of the reason why I wanted to write for kids is because I wanted to create characters that were the people that I wished I had read about when I was a kid, who kind of had my experiences. So thank you for saying that to me. That means a lot. And that's why I write, to create experiences and to show other kinds of people to other people, and so you can relate in that way. But yeah, I think that's very hard for Mina. That kind of thing was very hard for me as a kid. But I wanted to sort of show how she makes the most of the time with her dad when he does get home, how the whole family sort of tries to, if they're in a bad mood, let the bad mood go away and just focus on the here and now and really take advantage of the time together and the joy together. But it's hard, for sure. Yes. Okay.
How did you came up with the idea of the book? How did you do
The idea for the book, I think it just comes from what I was saying about how I felt as a kid and how I didn't really ever get to read about people like myself when I was a kid. So, but really I drew a lot on my own experiences and feelings and what your peer was just talking about with that feeling of not quite fitting in the city or wherever you are, just like the rules not really making sense. There's a different set of rules that you live in your family, and then there's a different set of rules in the wider world and society. That was a really important thing for me to write about, that tension. So kind of the idea came from my own experiences and what I felt I hadn't gotten as a kid. Yes?
What is your favorite book?
My favorite book and author. So in terms of books for kids, I'm kind of, do people still read Madeleine L'Engle? A Wrinkle in Time, The Swiftly Tilting Planet. I really loved Madeleine L'Engle when I was a kid. And Ursula K. Le Guin, she's a fabulous feminist sci-fi writer. Have you guys read any of her? She's really good. Especially, you've read Ursula K. Le Guin? She's awesome. So I loved her. I loved all the Lord of the Rings books. I was horse crazy. I don't know why as a kid, but I read like The King of the Wind, the Black Stallion series. These are all old-fashioned. Okay, yeah, you read those. Wind in the Willows was a British book I really loved. Anything about animals I loved as a kid. Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. Has anybody read that book? I love that book. I love her as an author. And now as an adult, Walter Dean Myers. Have you guys read any Walter Dean Myers? He's amazing. You should read him. Christopher Myers, his son, is really great too. Naomi Shihab Nye. Has anybody here read Naomi Shihab Nye? Oh, you gotta read her. She's so good. Her book Honeybee is for kids. That's 19 Varieties of Gazelle is for kids. Naomi Shihab Nye. Tell your teachers to get her. She's so amazing. Okay, there were more questions over here. How are we doing on time? Am I babbling too much?
No, you're fine.
Okay, good. Yes.
What inspired you to write the book?
What inspired me to write the book? It's pretty much what I've been saying, but let me see if I can think of something else that inspired me to write the book. I don't know. One thing that inspired me to write the book is New York City, because it always annoys me when I see New York City in movies and TV, how they don't get us, I feel like. You have to be a New Yorker to get New York. And it's always like really violent and everything's exploding and everybody's like really fabulously dressed. It's like they only show one version of New York City in TVs and movies for the most part. And that has always bothered me. So part of what inspired me to write the book is a love for New York and wanting to show a different side of New York, a more immigrant New York. I mean, nobody ever writes about, you never see Chinatown, really. And if you see Chinatown, you only see Chinese Chinatown. You don't see the full diversity of the place. So I was interested in telling a New York story in a real way. And I know Silas felt the same about the region called Appalachia. So Southern Appalachia, people are usually written about in movies and TV in a very stereotypical way. And stereotyping is such a big part of the book, right? Talking about stereotyping. So usually everyone's like a weird backwards hillbilly who doesn't have shoes and they drink a lot of moonshine or something. They talk really funny. So he was interested in breaking that stereotype and showing a real human face to an Appalachian boy. And I felt the same way about writing about a first-generation girl character, an immigrant from New York City who lives in Chinatown. So giving a real face to place was as important to us as giving a real face to our characters.
Before we see the
Yes.
next question, if your questions have already been answered, you're not going to ask them, okay? So Bria had a good idea to check off your questions if Neela has already answered them, because we're getting some repeat questions at this point. And the last thing is please keep your hands down until she's finished speaking. And then you can raise your hand for the next one.
You know you're super excited and you're like, you want to ask that one question, but if it's asked, try and find another one, okay? All right.
Okay. Yes. I like the eye squinting technique. It made me zero in on you.
How did you and Cyrus decide what you were gonna write in?
What we were going to write in the book? So that one I sort of answered a little bit earlier, but I kind of blew by it. We never decided what to write. So a weird thing about writing fiction, because it's partly imagined, it's mostly imagined, the characters. Some people, I'm one of those writers who I don't have an outline, I don't know where I'm going, I don't know what's going to happen to my character before I start. I have a sense of who the person is, the character, as a person, what their life is like, where they come from, kind of who they are. That's all I know. So then I just start writing and I see what happens. And I try to follow the character and let them live their own full life as much as possible. So Silas is the same kind of writer. Although he kind of did know where he was headed. About halfway through the book, he sent me an email saying, this is the only thing I'm going to tell you. I know at the end of River's section, he comes to New York. So he sort of had some idea of where he was going, a very vague one, whereas I had no clue. I was just following my character. But writers write in different ways, and some writers have a clear sense, a clear outline before they begin. I'm not that way. So, we talked already. Yes, we didn't speak.
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have any other popular books?
I do, and how old are you guys?
12 and
10. Okay, you ask your teacher, when you're, I have this book called You Have Given Me a Country, and it's a memoir actually, it's nonfiction, about what it was like for me growing up as a biracial, bicultural kid. My father's Indian, my mother's Irish, my mother's Catholic, my father's Hindu. His first language is Hindi Sindhi, my mother's first language is English, so it's a lot of difference and a lot of negotiating and balancing cultures. So that's what that book is about. And a lot of high school kids read it and a lot of college kids read it. So I think you're not quite old enough for it, although there's nothing like really racy or dirty about it, but your teachers can read it and maybe they can pluck out a couple of appropriate sections. But it really is extremely clean. And then I have a picture book for little kids coming out next year, which you guys are way too old for it, but if you have little siblings, you could read it to them. Always good to read to your siblings and make them readers too.
Okay, and...
Oh, right, you had 2.
And, were there any books that you wrote when you were little but never published?
Oh, yeah. Yes, that's a great question. I cannot even tell you. I have probably written enough to fill this room that has never been published. If you printed out all the pages, so it's really not about getting published as a writer. It's sort of the journey of writing and figuring out what you think and feel on the page and crafting something to a point where you're really happy with it. But sometimes something just doesn't work, or sometimes only like 1 paragraph out of 10 pages works. And then that's what happens as a writer. It's a lot of work and a lot of effort, and it's always a learning, growing process. So I guess, probably the first thing I ever wrote, I was 5 years old and started writing poems, and they were bad, but they were true and real. It's what I felt, and that's how I learned, and that's how I grew. So I've been writing for probably about 35 years. My first book was published when I was 27, 28 or something, and my first short story was published when I was 21. So and I have 3 books, and the 4th one on the way, and I just told you I have a room full of things that I've written that have not been published. So it's not about the publishing. And also, I'm still learning and growing as a writer. Every single time I start a new piece of writing, I feel like I'm starting over from the beginning and I'm having to learn all over again. So you never reach a point as a human being or as a writer where you're done learning and growing. So I'm still learning and growing. I still mess up all the time. I still write pages and pages that are no good. This happens, and it's okay. We didn't speak, did we? No. Let's speak. Hello.
Yeah. What source did the photos river sent Neela and Samson?
Okay, say that one more time. I'm old and hard of hearing.
What source did the photos river sent Neela and Samson?
What photos?
Like in the book, river sent.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, since Mina was drawing, he hadn't thought about River as a photographer until he saw the little drawings on the sides of my letters. And then he thought, oh, I think River likes to take pictures. So he included some postcards too, I think, towards the end. I think she might have sent him a postcard too on his birthday or something. Like I said, you've read it more recently than I have. And so, yeah, I'm not sure I'm answering your question very well, but I think images tell a different kind of story than words, right? Like when you look at a picture, there's a story going on in the picture. So we both wanted to kind of enrich the overall story by not just having things in words, but then also having little bits of their story told in images. And what was your other question?
Who would you like me to say
Similar
similar to Kiku?
to Kiku. Good question. So Kiku, I have a cousin Kiku who I love, and I always wanted to name a character after him just to celebrate him. But this is weird. I mean, actually, so a lot of Kiku is my cousin Kiku, a lot of Kiku is my cousin Naresh, and a lot of Kiku is my husband. I don't know why, but all of a sudden he had all these qualities of my husband. Like, for example, my husband is a crazy metalhead, and he likes to like put stuff in his hair and like headbang around, and all of a sudden Kiku was doing that, and I was like, there's my husband in Kiku, but okay, I like that. And the little thing that Kiku, when Kiku teaches Mina how to get out her grief and her anger at the subway and scream as the subway's going by, my husband taught me to do that when he had been moved to New York a couple of years before me. So we were, he was like 23 and I was 21. Anyway, one day we were at the subway and we weren't necessarily filled with grief and anger at that moment, but it was like a fun thing. He was just showing me, look, you can scream as loud as you want when the subway comes in and no one hears you. So we did it, but it always struck me as another way to like put your feelings somewhere. If they overwhelm you, you stand when the subway comes in and scream a little and kind of get it out of you. And I didn't know Mina was going to do that. I didn't know Kiku was going to teach her. But when she lost her grandmother, it was so terribly sad and she had all these feelings, and suddenly it came to me, okay, they're going to scream when they're down at the subway. It came to me in the moment while I was typing. And I followed that instinct, and that's how that scene happened. Who have I not spoken to? Is there anyone with their hand raised that I've not spoken to? Did we speak? No, I'm sorry. I kept seeing you. Okay.
What made you, what made you think of making Nina
So like I said, I was born and raised in the United States, but we went back and forth to India as much as we possibly could, and I did live there for a year as a kid. So as a writer, we have this old saying in writing, it's called write what you know. And that doesn't mean that you can only write what you know. It just means, I don't know, it's more about emotional truth. But anyway, so I wanted to write what I was familiar with so that I could portray it realistically, and because I know how to give a human face to a young Indian American character. So that's why, and Silas felt the exact same way about Eastern Kentucky, about Kentucky. So that's where it came from. What I was saying earlier about wanting to give a face, a real face to people and places that sometimes don't seem very real when you see them in other books or in movies or TV. Yes, you got me saying yes, and we've spoken.
Not to put your hand up.
Put your hand up.
I have to say, on page 157,
Okay.
when we were talking about how the boy was being bullied, I wanted to say that's kind of bullying because in the computer science class we talk about cyberbullying and bullying and how it's bad.
Yep.
So when like throughout the whole story, I feel how you show that people last for how people have punched someone in the face, and how Neela had told the story about the boy who was being called meanie, who he turned it to a positive thing.
Right.
And I wanted to say for me, story, I was motivated to write my own letters. So I was after that this morning, I wrote my own letter to my brother because he's not feeling well. He got diabetes. So whenever he gets sick or something, it turns to diabetic, but he's out of the hospital, so I was going to say.
That's beautiful. That's so good. I hope he feels better and keeps on feeling better, and you can help him by remembering when to take his insulin and to not eat too much sugar and stuff. But that's really beautiful, and that's what writing's all about. Sometimes you feel so much, and then you can share your words with someone else and bring them comfort and joy. So thank you so much. I'm really happy. Okay. Yes, you had your hand raised and we haven't spoken. I'm putting you on the spot.
Did you write all these books?
I did not write all these books. I wish I wrote all these books. No, I did not. Fabulous, wonderful people wrote all these books, and we should all read them.
Can we raise our hands if we have not asked the question yet?
So did we not speak? I'm so sorry.
Where did you write the book? What dates?
Good question. So I started writing it in New York City. And actually, my husband was in the hospital at the time. He was very sick. So I wrote it sitting in a really little uncomfortable chair next to his hospital bed. I'd say the first, the first bunch of letters were written that way. And then he was feeling better, and I went to India to teach for 6 weeks. And actually during that time, Silas and I didn't mail the letters, we emailed them just during it was like a month and a half. So I wrote some in India, and then I was on tour with another book, and I wrote a bunch of it in California, Montana, and Illinois, in families' houses or in hotel rooms. But the most of it I wrote in New York City. So sometimes you see I had to write it in a hospital, sometimes I had to write in a hotel room, sometimes I wrote it in my very own apartment, which was very exciting. But being a writer, you have to find the time and the place to write. You don't always get to write in ideal conditions of at your favorite desk with your favorite cup of tea. Sometimes you just have to write wherever the heck you are. And I happened to be all over the place that year, and so I wrote wherever I was. And same thing with dancing, painting, cooking, music, whatever your thing is, don't forget you can do it anywhere. You don't need a studio to dance. You don't need dance class. You can put your music in your ears and boogie at the corner or like in the middle of your room, right? So when you have that feeling, just find a place for it and go for it. So who else did we speak? Oh my God. You two, with the red earrings and the headband, you're sparkly, so I kept feeling like we spoke.
All I wanted to say is there any lessons in this book that you want us to know?
Wow, that's a good question. And I want you to know. Be true to yourself and what you feel and what you know is true for you and yours. Be kind and good to other people. Try not to have preconceived notions. You might see someone, like I think if Mina had passed River on the street, she'd be like, who's that weird southern white boy? I'm not going to talk to him. He talks funny and he's weird and he's a boy. But when they actually got to know each other, they saw that they had way more in common than they had that was different. And I think that's true of all people. So just keep an open mind and be open to each other, and especially kind of be open to the people you feel most like, because really most people, not all people, but we're New Yorkers, we know it's not all people, but most people, you sit down and you talk to them and you can find this common ground. There's something about the human experience that's completely universal. We all get sick, we all laugh, we all cry, so just be in touch with that and stand up for what you believe in. I think that's a really important message of the book. There's something going wrong in your neighborhood, in your family, in your community, use your voice to speak out against it in a safe way. Write about it, or go to a community meeting, or just tell the people around you how you feel. Yeah. Great question, thank you. Okay, did we speak? No. Yes, we spoke? No, we didn't speak. Yeah, my parents were a really big part of the book I wrote before this one. So yeah, they were absolutely inspired me. They're in here for sure. Just their circumstances and that emotional truth I was talking about is in both of Mina's parents in terms of my parents, I think. Just working so much and sacrifices that have to be made in order to work. But I think they were a larger influence on my last book. But yeah, I mean, you know, everyone who's close to me inspires me in everything I do, and there's a little bit of everyone in my life in all of my books. You just can't help it, it just comes through. Oh. Anyone I didn't speak to?
Maybe 2 more questions?
2 more questions, okay. Anyone I didn't speak to? Okay, yes.
Okay, you said that you wrote your book in New York and stuff. Do you live like in New York, or do you live like far away? You just come to visit?
No, I live in New York. I've lived in New York. I grew up on well, we moved around a lot, but I spent more time in Long Island than anywhere else. And we lived in Queens when I was little for a little while. But since 1994, basically, I lived in New York City, with some coming and going, but my main home being in New York. So, and I've lived in a lot of different neighborhoods. I lived in a couple of neighborhoods in Brooklyn, I lived in Chelsea, I lived in Chinatown, I lived in the Upper West Side, the Upper East Side, the Lower East Side, and now I live in Inwood. It's in Manhattan, but it's basically the Bronx. And so, yeah, I know New York. I lived all over, and as a writer, every neighborhood is different, every place is different, and you try to always soak up those details. Okay, only one more question. I'm going to have to go to this side of the room. Yes? Have I met any famous people who read my book? Yeah, I know a couple of famous people who read my book. Yeah. I don't know, the one